Police are also asking for help finding a missing man, and they specifically want hunters to be on the lookout this weekend because they think that he met with foul play. Lacey Chris spent the day in Fond du Lac looking for details.
A 37-year-old man vanished from his home in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, sparking a missing persons investigation that would soon unravel into something far darker.
I don't point fingers at nobody. I let the police do their job. And I'm not mad at nobody. But he need to be found. But ain't nobody said nothing about him in there. 7 days they've been in jail. Okay, I don't know if they did it or they didn't do it. Okay, he been missing for 27 days.
Investigators are calling it a complicated investigation.
Timothy Nance's naked body was eventually discovered frozen in a wooded area on Thanksgiving Day, shot twice in the head.
Police say they believe they have found the body of a missing Fond du Lac man, Timothy Nance. A man who described himself as one of Nance's friends said today, at least now there is some closure.
This is the story of a relationship marked by love, betrayal, violence, and ultimately tragedy. It raises difficult questions about domestic abuse, patience pushed beyond its limits, and the moment when anger transforms into something irreversible. What happened between Eve and Timothy Nance was the culmination of years of dysfunction, broken promises, and escalating tension that finally exploded on an ordinary November evening. The quiet community of Fond du Lac would be forced to grapple with the truth that many already suspected. Behind the closed doors of what appeared to be just another troubled marriage, something deadly had been building for a very long time. Timothy James Nance entered the world in February 1976 in Centralia, Illinois. Standing shorter than average, friends affectionately nicknamed him Shorty Tim. But those who spent time with him remembered someone whose personality filled every room he entered. He had natural charisma, an infectious smile, and a gift for making people feel at ease. At the time of his death, Timothy worked at Basic American Metal in Fond du Lac. Friends described him as someone who had worked to turn his life around despite past legal troubles. He was a devoted father to his daughter, Tamika, cherishing that role even as other aspects of his life grew increasingly complicated. Tim first met Eve at a friend's gathering in 1992, when both were just 16. The connection was immediate and intense. They shared similar senses of humor, both loved entertaining others, and bonded over their youthful energy. Their relationship progressed rapidly, perhaps too rapidly for teenagers barely out of childhood. Within months, they had moved into an apartment together. When Eve became pregnant, the young couple began planning a wedding. But their path to marriage took an unexpected detour. In 1994, when Eve was 9 months pregnant, an assailant attacked her outside their apartment, attempting to steal her purse. Tim rushed outside with a firearm and, in the chaos, shot the attacker in the foot. Despite claiming he acted in defense of his pregnant girlfriend, authorities arrested him on assault charges. As officers led Tim away in handcuffs, Eve went into labor. Their daughter Tamika was born while her father was being processed into jail. Tim spent nearly a year behind bars before his release in 1995. On his way home from prison, he and Eve stopped at the courthouse and finally married, a ceremony that should have marked a fresh start, but instead foreshadowed complications to come. Eve maintained a close relationship with her younger sister Tina, who moved in with the couple in 1995. 2 years later, Tina gave birth to her daughter, Justice. The two young girls grew up more like sisters than cousins, creating a tight-knit family unit. Tim's legal troubles weren't over. In 1997, he faced arrest again on drug-related charges and served 3 years, further straining the young family and forcing Eve to shoulder more responsibility. In 2002, Tim, Eve, and Tamika relocated to Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, a community that locals proudly described as the All-American City. Named after its position at the southern end of Lake Winnebago, It was the kind of quiet, family-oriented place where people came to settle down. Finding steady employment proved difficult for Tim, given his criminal record. He cycled through various odd jobs, never quite finding solid footing. Eve became the family's primary breadwinner, working in mental health care where she dedicated herself to helping others navigate psychological struggles. According to Tameka's later recollections, her mother worked constantly while her father did his best to contribute by staying home with Tameka and her cousin Justice. But Tim's time at home didn't always translate to domestic responsibilities. He became a fixture in the local social scene, frequently spending evenings at neighborhood bars playing pool. He was popular and well-liked, always at the center of gatherings. However, this social nature came with a darker side that would slowly poison his marriage. Tim developed a reputation as unfaithful. According to friends familiar with their relationship, his infidelity wasn't subtle or occasional. It was frequent, increasingly blatant, and impossible for Eve to ignore. While Tim initially tried to conceal his affairs, over time he grew careless. Eve was painfully aware. The couple argued constantly, and these disputes frequently escalated into physical confrontations. The violence went both ways, though Tim's actions left visible marks, including one incident where he fractured Eve's leg during a fight. By 2013, they had been married for 15 years, and the pattern was firmly established. Tim started yet another affair, and when Eve came home to find him in bed with another woman, she punched him in the face. Friends and family urged both to end the marriage. Eve's brother pointedly asked why she continued staying. Her response revealed complicated psychology. She would rather have some of Tim's time and attention than none at all. Tim told a friend he was having his cake and eating it too, maintaining the stability and domestic support of marriage while pursuing relationships elsewhere without consequence. On a Tuesday in November of 2013, the Fond du Lac Police Department received a call that would launch one of the community's most complicated investigations.
Police are also asking for help finding a missing man, and they specifically want hunters to be on the lookout this weekend because they think that he met with foul play. Lacey Chris spent the day in Fond du Lac looking for details.
Friends and family say they haven't seen Timothy Nance since November 1st, and police say they haven't found him yet either.
We do believe that Mr. Nance was met with foul play. We do believe that he is deceased at this point.
And while police won't elaborate on what evidence they have, they are asking for your help.
Mr. Nance's whereabouts are still unknown. We are, with the start of the Wisconsin deer hunting season coming up here, we are asking hunters, people that might be out walking in fields, woods, if they do see anything suspicious, obviously to contact our local law enforcement agents.
Eve Nance reported that her husband had been missing for 4 days since November 1st. She told officers Tim had left the house on Friday evening and hadn't returned. She was both worried and frustrated, concerned something terrible had happened, yet annoyed he wasn't answering her calls. When officers arrived, Eve provided what she believed might explain his absence. She told them about their most recent fight, explaining that Tim had stormed out afterward and driven to Milwaukee, just over an hour away. She also shared a theory. Tim had been dealing drugs to make money, and while he hadn't used recently, she worried he might have relapsed and either harmed himself or gotten caught in a deal gone wrong. The theory seemed plausible on its surface. One close friend, Tasha, was adamant that while Tim might have occasionally dealt small amounts of marijuana, he definitely wasn't a hardcore drug user. The idea that he would disappear on some drug binge seemed completely out of character. Authorities contacted Tim's cell phone provider and learned something deeply troubling. There had been no activity on his phone for days. No calls, texts, or data usage. For someone as social as Tim, this digital silence was alarming. Multiple people told police Eve had threatened her husband on several occasions, even brandishing a gun at Tim and the women he was seeing. While everyone acknowledged Tim was far from perfect, A disturbing consensus formed among his friends. Tasha was blunt. She knew right away that Eve had killed him. A thorough search of the Nance residence yielded critical evidence. Investigators found a bullet hole in the bathroom wall. Detective Bill Ledger noticed something else. The shower curtain liners appeared brand new, as if recently replaced for a specific reason. Eve was asked to come to the station for further questioning. She maintained that although she knew about Tim's affairs, she wasn't particularly bothered. She claimed to accept who he was and denied ever threatening him with a weapon. But now police had physical evidence, a bullet hole, and multiple witnesses who testified to Eve threatening Tim with a gun. While they strongly suspected Tim was dead and Eve was responsible, they lacked two critical pieces, a body and a murder weapon. Without these, they couldn't charge her with homicide. What they did have was probable cause, a legal standard requiring more than suspicion, but less than absolute certainty. Eve and her sister Tina were arrested on November 20th, 2013, and booked into jail on charges of hiding and mutilating a corpse and obstruction. Eve's attorney fought for her release, arguing that holding her without formal murder charges violated her constitutional rights. After a week in custody, Eve indicated she wanted to speak with investigators again. She was ready to tell a very different story.
As we stated at that time, this investigation remained very active, particularly as it related to our search for Mr. Nance's body. Eve Nance also shared information with our detectives regarding her subsequent disposal of Mr. Nance's body and other evidence related to this crime. This information led our detectives to the metropolitan Milwaukee area and ultimately to a wooded section at the end of the 6200 block of North 101st Street in the city of Milwaukee. After a late night search of the area, City of Fond du Lac Police Department detectives discovered Mr. Nance's body in that brushy, wooded area at the end of that street. The autopsy has revealed that Mr. Nance died as a result of 2 gunshot wounds to the head. The discovery of Mr. Nance's body, the subsequent autopsy results, and all of our previous investigative findings have now led to the filing of a criminal complaint charging Eve Nance with first-degree intentional homicide and hiding a corpse. Although there have obviously been significant developments in criminal charges now filed in this case, the investigation remains ongoing and very active.
In her new account, Eve described an altercation on November 1st. She claimed she tried to walk away from an argument by going into the bathroom, but Tim followed. According to this version, Tim was waving a gun around and hitting her. She said that while trying to get the weapon away from him, it discharged and Tim was shot twice in the chest. Investigators asked the obvious question, why didn't she call 911? Eve's response was that she went blank, entering some kind of panic state. Instead of calling for help, she stripped Tim's clothes, wrapped him in plastic film and a shower curtain, loaded him into the car, and drove away. During their investigation, police obtained store surveillance footage showing Eve and Tina purchasing shower curtain liners and hooks at approximately 7:30 in the evening on the day Tim was killed. Investigators argued these were replacements for curtains covered in Tim's blood, evidence that needed disposal. Authorities also believed Tina helped conceal the crime beyond purchasing supplies. Phone records showed Eve had called Tina 5 times in the minutes immediately following Tim's death. Officers argued Eve wouldn't have been physically able to move Tim's body alone. The evidence painted a picture very different from the spontaneous struggle Eve described. Prosecutors argued that Eve executed her husband, shooting him as he stood in the shower without warning. The prosecution's theory was straightforward. After years of humiliation and betrayal, Eve finally acted on her rage in a calculated attack she then tried to cover up with her sister's help. In January 2016, 39-year-old Eve Nance stood trial and entered a not guilty plea. The prosecution built their case around forensic evidence showing Eve's self-defense claim couldn't be true. The medical examiner's testimony about bullet trajectories entering Tim's head rather than chest, combined with the bullet hole placement, directly contradicted her account of a struggle. prosecutors emphasized that Eve then took deliberate steps to dispose of the body and cover up what she'd done. According to prosecutors, the motive was simple: rage and revenge after years of public humiliation. They pointed to evidence that Tim was planning to leave Eve for another woman, highlighting previous incidents where Eve had pulled a gun on Tim and his girlfriends. The defense presented a different narrative, introducing expert testimony about battered person syndrome. They argued Eve had endured years of infidelity in a volatile, violent relationship that slowly broke down her psychological defenses. Defense attorneys noted Tim flaunted multiple girlfriends, even bringing them to their home, creating constant humiliation and emotional abuse. While acknowledging Eve reacted in anger, they maintained it was also self-defense born from years of trauma, that in that moment, she finally cracked under unbearable pressure. Tim's friends strenuously rejected this characterization. From their perspective, Tim wasn't the aggressor. However, Temeka offered testimony supporting her mother's version of their home life. She told the court her father was always the aggressor, wanting things his way, and that he was the source of violence. Less than 2 weeks after the trial began, the jury reached their verdict. They sided with the prosecution. Eve was found guilty of first-degree intentional homicide and hiding a corpse. At sentencing, prosecutors asked for life with no possibility of parole, arguing the crime was execution. Defense attorneys requested the judge allow Eve to file for release on extended supervision after serving 20 years. The judge acknowledged Eve's credibility was suspect. She'd killed her husband, hidden his body, and lied to authorities. However, the judge also noted Eve had no previous criminal record and appeared to have suffered from battered person syndrome, the product of years of physical and psychological abuse. The judge characterized what happened as a crime of passion, indicating some leniency should be given. Eve Nance was sentenced to life in prison for murder and 5 additional years for hiding the body, with eligibility to petition for extended supervision after 25 years. When that time comes, she'll be 62. Release isn't guaranteed. She'll have to petition the court. When given the opportunity to speak, Eve turned to face Temeka and expressed her love, telling her that whatever happened, she loved her very much. Several people spoke on Eve's behalf. Temeka made an emotional plea, telling the court her mother wasn't a monster, but a wonderful person, and that she couldn't bear to lose both parents. Eve addressed the judge directly, stating she had loved her husband from the moment she first saw him and still loved him. She offered no excuse for what she'd done, expressing only remorse and grief. As for Tina Ewell, she faced her own legal consequences. She was found guilty of hiding a corpse as party to the crime, aiding a felon, and obstructing an officer. In December 2016, then 36, she received 1 year in prison, followed by 5 years of extended supervision and 5 years of probation. Both Eve and Tina filed appeals, but both were denied. In March 2019, the Wisconsin Court of Appeals upheld Eve's conviction, finding police hadn't engaged in coercive conduct in obtaining her statements. Eve remains incarcerated at Taycheedah Correctional Institution in Fond du Lac. Tina completed her sentence and now lives in Fond du Lac under community supervision. What actually happened on that November evening can never be known with absolute certainty. The only 2 people who witnessed the moment Tim Nance died were Tim himself and Eve. Tim cannot speak, and Eve's multiple, conflicting accounts have made establishing truth nearly impossible. What is certain is that a young woman essentially lost both parents in the most devastating way imaginable.